Hello everyone out there. Welcome back to SAT Writing. This is Practice Test B with me, Namgyang, by Masterprep and Barron's SAT Writing. Okay, so if you checked out the Practice Test A, the entire section, you know what our whole thing is about, and I don't need to really explain to you, any of these stuff. You can just probably the best thing to do is go A, B, C, and D. But I don't think it'll be too big of a problem if you chose like A, B, D, C, as long as you understand the routine that I go through. And I am a believer of routines, doing it in doing whatever the task is in an orderly fashion, because if you get used to it, actually it'll be a part of you. So whatever you do, wherever you go, it just kind of falls into place. Of course, there can be exceptions, but what I'm trying to say is if you understand the way in which I actually follow through the questions, it'll probably help you no matter where or what test you're solving. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get started with Practice Test B, Part 1, Section 2, which is, of course, improving sentences. I do not cover the essay portion here because, of course, this is multiple choice, and the writing, perhaps, at a later time. Okay, so let's look at number 1. While walking down Market Street, that was when Clarissa sighted her old guitar in the pawn shop window. Okay, who sold her guitar? No, someone stole it. I know that's only for these days. I'm sure she pawned it herself, or I don't know. But anyway, if you look at the sentence, the first thing that you can try to do is when I first took a look at the test, because yes, I do solve them myself before I actually prepare for the lecture. What I did was while walking down this Market Street, I just said that was when. I was thinking, why are they saying that was when? They're telling us while we're doing this anyway, so we don't need that was then. That was when, whatever. So I would just simply cross this out and say, while walking down Market Street, Clarissa sighted her old guitar in the pawn shop. And of course, I'm not happy with A. Clarissa sighted her old guitar in her pawn shop window. Wow, okay. Then the sighting of Clarissa's old guitar took the, oh no. Clarissa's old guitar was sighted in the pawn shop window? No. In the window of the pawn shop, her old guitar was sighted by Clarissa. Too wordy. Now, I think, if anything, you might consider why not D. But the question is, who is the focus of this sentence? And it is, of course, Clarissa. So that means that if you make Clarissa the object, like this one, here the subject is going to be the old guitar, not Clarissa. We don't want that. Right? We want to say Clarissa saw it. So we're going to say B is the right answer. I wish it was a little bit closer. I'm going to kind of squish into the thing. Okay? So we know that you need to always make sure what is the subject of the sentence. Okay, number 2. As a student at Penn State, where Julie grew to love history with a passion, ultimately leading to a job as a historian at the United States Library of Congress. Same thing I did with number 1 I did here. I just simply crossed out, it just doesn't make sense. As a student at Penn State, then we have to have the student there come first, right? Because it's as a student, then you should have a name of a student, but that didn't happen. So I didn't like A. B sounds, well, just by looking at Julie, okay. Where she, I didn't like. Julie's love. Now, again, what is the focus of the sentence? What is the main thing in the sentence, the subject? It's Julie, what Julie did. She loved it or grew to love it so much that she became the United States, a historian at the United States Library of Congress. So it's not Julie's love that is the focus. Okay, and of course the where again, I don't like. So very easy. B is your answer. Notice some of the questions, it'll be this easy. It's the beginning questions and it's not that difficult. But also, don't try to make it difficult for yourself. It's just plain out simple, some of these things. Okay, so number 2 is B. Let's look at number 3. The letter was intended for Betsy and him, but the actual recipients of the bad news were Peter and I. So it's this whole issue with him, I, me. Is it I or me? Is it he or him? I kind of wrote outside line. But the issue here is, how do we know? Okay. If the person, whomever, if, like for instance, if it's I, you're receiving the action, then it's going to be me. If you're kind of like separated from that action, it's going to be I. So what I mean by this is, Betsy and him. Okay, the letter was intended for Betsy and him. So who, if there's something like this in front, this goes, because what this means is that this is going to be the object that receives the action. Okay? However, if you are not at the receiving end, but you're like the subject, then you need to use I. What I mean by that is, this one, the letter was intended, it's a complete idea in and of its own. The action is being received because this is for and then him. Now, what I need you to make sure is identify whether the person is an object or the subject of a particular action that is taking place. For instance, we know it's an object. We know that this him is receiving the action. It's because it's for someone. So let's look at A. Betsy and him, but the actual recipients of the bad news were Peter and I. Now, how can we test this? We can say, can we take this and go backwards? Peter and I were the recipients of the bad news. That actually works. Versus Peter and me were the recipients of the bad news. So notice, this actually is a good sentence. Now, I'm not telling you to fix everything so it fits, then in that case, there's no way to test it. But just from what is actually given to you, you're gonna test and see whether it makes sense and whether it fits or not. Because either way, it should fit. Now, B, if you look at B. Betsy and I, but the actual recipients of the bad news were Peter and I. Notice, we said if it's for someone that this is gonna be the object, so this cannot be I, it should be me, so out. C, Betsy and him, but Peter and me actually received the bad news. Now, in this case, what is the problem here? Yeah, Peter, it should be Peter and I actually received the bad news, because what is going on is this format, the original format, and this format doesn't really have a difference. Only notice the focus of this was the actual recipients is going to be the subject, but here they switch it off. And remember, we said we don't want to go too far off from the original sentence. So it might have been, maybe, but I would say I like the A better, so I'm going to say no. What about D? Betsy and, remember what we said, him. They're at the receiving end of the action, right? Same thing here, Betsy and me. But the bad news was actually received by. Now, in this case, we have was received by. Hint, hint, hint. If it's by, then what does this have to be? Peter and me. Because again, they're receiving the action. It's received by somebody and me. Okay? So the only answer that actually fits in all of this would be A. Got it? You need a little more practice, especially if you're confused with that, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get it. You will.